Well, hey friends, welcome to the Everyday Mulemanship Podcast. I'm Ty Evans. Thanks so much for tuning into this show. We sure appreciate you. Today I got a friend of mine on that I'm really excited to talk to, Miss Emily Kitching. She is the editor of Eclectic Horseman Magazine, and she puts together the Horseman's Gazette. Um, we've been in both of those, so that's
Yeah,
kind of fun.
yeah, yeah.
Um, anyways, we sure appreciate everything you do, Emily. You do the horsemanship world a really big favor in spreading this education. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Thanks for coming
Well,
on.
thanks. I'm excited to be here. Like I was
Yeah.
saying, it's fun to be on the other side.
Yeah. 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 You're always doing the interviewing and the videoing, and you do, man, you do so much. You go all over the place, and yeah. So, anyways, today you get to just hang out and tell your story for once, you
I
know?
know.
So
Crazy.
that'll be fun. So, anyways, for my listeners that might not know who you are, a lot of them do know who you are because I've tried to kick a lot of people over to your magazine. You know, it's a wonderful magazine, and
Thank you.
so a lot of them do know you. But for those that don't, maybe you could take a moment and introduce yourself, your family, um, talk about what you do a little bit.
Sure. I'm Emily, and I have published Eclectic Horseman Magazine since 2001. And we've done the Horseman's Gazette, which is a quarterly video series since 2009. Before that, I worked at a magazine called The Trail Less Traveled, and I was there for about 4 years when I was in college and just after. And it's amazing how many people still remember me from those days. So
Yeah.
I've been doing this. I started doing freelance in high school, so I've been doing this a long time. I My husband and I work together, and we have one daughter who's a junior in high school, and she's grown up on the road with us. You know, we started doing the Horseman's Gazette in 2009 when she was under a year, because that's the thing that makes the most sense when you have a baby, is to go make a commitment to go on the road and, and film all this content. But it's been great. I mean, she's grown up meeting lots of incredible people, and going to trade shows and events and things like that. So it is. I mean, it's the three of us. It's a small family business, and I love it. I wouldn't want to have my life be any other way.
Yeah, it's really cool what you guys get to do. Um, I'm particularly, jealous of you that you get to be around so many great horsemen. I get to be around a lot of them, but just for a little bit of time because then I got to go back and do, back to my real job, my real life, do my
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But your job and your life is interviewing these great horsemen and women. It's really cool. So that's
It
great.
is.
You,
And I mean it's been, like I said, I've been doing this a long time. So I mean, when I first was at the Trail Less Traveled, and I wanted to do I wanted to do an article with Brian Newbert,
Mhm.
and he was like, "No, I'm not really interested in doing an article. I've been interviewed by other magazines. They always get it wrong. I just don't really want to." And so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what can I do to make this? Because I knew who he was. I'd seen him work. I'm like, I've got to make this work. So, I said, well, I'll send you the article, and you can make sure that I get it right, because that's like my whole thing, is getting it right. And we did that. And then 25 years later, we still do articles and videos together because of that. And so I feel like putting the time in to build the relationship with each of my sources has served me very well, and gotten me the ability to gather information that maybe other places haven't, because they haven't put that time in.
Yeah, I could see where he's coming from because I've had a lot of inquiries, people wanting to do videos in podcasts, even like this, and interviews and articles and things. And if I don't know who they are, especially if they don't have references, I'm kind of like, you know, uh, because there are some dark forces out there that kind of want to shut down what we do. There is,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
they they want people not to ride horses anymore. There's some people out there. Anyway, so I am a little skeptical sometimes when
Yeah.
people will reach out. I'm like, what's your motive? Because I'm happy to share all the education, you know.
Hmm.
And I give away way more education for free than I've ever charged for, you know. So I'm happy to do it. And you were so wonderful when you reached out to me the first time, um, you know. And I guess it was easier for me too because I already had your magazine. So,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that helped. So I'm like, okay, cool. This is a great opportunity. But you know, I remember when you came out there, you met me. Where were we in Colorado? Canyon City.
Canyon City, yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was a cool
Canyon City.
spot.
It was a cool spot up there in those red rocks and up that canyon. It was pretty neat, but yeah, we had some fun. That was a good
Yeah,
day. So,
yeah, yeah.
so let's go way back. I want to go way back to like your journey in horsemanship because, you know, let's face it, what you do is unique. Like for you to pursue this style of horsemanship and put this out in the world, it's really unique. You know what I mean? Because um you've kind of dug yourself into a hole like myself. You know, I've put myself into this corner of the mule world, right? That's what I'm known for is mules. No, nobody knows about all the horses I ride and all the stuff I do with horses, which is fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
They don't need to know all my horse background, you know, and you know, like I got this whole pen of mules out here and then I got my horses. Nobody wants to know about the horses. You know, they want to see the mule
Yeah,
stuff. So,
yeah. Yeah,
anyways,
but
but
you're so unique in what you do with the mules. I mean, like that, it
yeah.
really is it's a niche of a niche.
Yeah, so but you've kind of done the same thing in your uh in your teachings and sharing of teachings as well because you know there's plenty of other magazines out there that you know you open it up and you'll have a training tip from uh a team roper
Hmm.
and then in the same magazine you have a training tip from you know kind of a Great Basin buckaroo style cowboy. Um you know, but you've really put yourself into that niche, which I appreciate so much because I can open up your magazine and it's consistent. You know, I could take the teachings, what you share from, you know, Martin Black and then, you know, like Brian Newbert and
Hmm.
know that it's consistent. And
Hmm.
I could take those lessons from both those practitioners and I could apply them and it would go good for me.
Hmm.
Whereas some of these other publishers or whatever, it wouldn't have that crossover.
Hmm.
Anyways, so my point of saying this is I want to know what made you that way because that's pretty unique. Like, so let's go. I want to go way back in your
Way
horsemanship
back.
journey. Talk about that kind of thing.
Well, like way, way back, I would, let's see, I would have to say I grew up around, like my mom had a horse that she raised from a baby when she was in high school and took that horse with her wherever she went. And he was a part of our lives, even though he was a thoroughbred, quarter appendix thoroughbred, and a little bit loopy, a little bit goofy. So like mom rode him, and we didn't really get to ride him till he was in his late 20s. But I grew up with all these stories of her taking this horse out and riding in the California mountains, in the Utah mountains, and riding for 8 hours at a time, pulling off her bridle, taking a nap under the tree, and whistling, and Comanche would come running, and so like that was sort of the foundation of this. Like, I mean, like that was just part of my life. And then we moved to Colorado when I was in junior high, and we moved right next to a boarding facility, and so we kept Comanche there, and I'd look out the window and I'd see people riding, and I was like, okay, how can I want to be over there and be around horses. So I cleaned stalls and traded to be able to ride. And there was a dressage instructor there, and um, I because that was what was there. That's who I got involved with. So that my very first exposure to like lessons and structured riding was with Sandy Holtz, and she was an incredible instructor, and I really fell in love um, with dressage and sort of that structure of education and having a clear path and the history of it. And I mean, I took German in high school because I wanted to go to Germany and be a dressage person. Um, and then she moved to New York to go pursue, a bigger area of dressage. And And then Mindy Bauer moved into the barn across the street and brought all of these horses that needed extra help. And we had actually hired her to trailer load my mom's old horse because he was 28 and still wouldn't load in the trailer. And I wanted to take him and do 4-H at the fairgrounds. And so that was sort of my first exposure to any kind of horsemanship was, Mindy taking this horse that, nobody but my mom could do anything with really. And in like 15 minutes, he was loading in and out of the trailer. So I was like, there's something going on here that I don't really know about. We still couldn't load him in and out of the trailer. So I gave up on 4-H at that point. But so then she was there at the barn and I was still cleaning stalls and riding horses there. And she said, "Hey, do you want to start one of my colts in a Buck Brannaman clinic?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's a Buck Brannaman clinic?" Like I had no no idea, but it sounded like, I just said, I wanted more. I wanted to learn. And so when I started Curly in that clinic, I was still riding dressage and I still had that part of what I thought I wanted to do. But then this exposure to this different way of learning with the horse and having this partnership in education, like it immediately felt different in that the horse understood what was being asked of him. And it just felt different fundamentally than what I had been exposed to so far. Like after Sandy left, I was still working at a dressage barn as a working student. And I had an amazing opportunity to ride all these upper level horses. And I mean, I really had great opportunities there. But I never felt like, not never, a lot of the horses didn't really understand their job or feel good about their job. Or, I remember particularly riding this off the track thoroughbred, and he was a young horse and he was being asked to do like lateral work. And he had no idea, And I'm like, I'm trying to, and they're like, well, you might need to use a whip, you might need to use spurs. And I just had this fundamental aversion because I just felt like the horse didn't know and didn't understand what was being asked of him. So just like, that sort of inherent injustice, when you're a teenager, you're very sensitive to those sorts of things. So then I was sort of going down this path with these two opposing or two different worldviews. And then I just made the decision to go with the one that felt the most right to me and the most right to the horses that I was riding. And I just haven't looked back since.
You know, what's fascinating to me is that you had the capacity to recognize the horse was or wasn't understanding. But I think a lot of people don't even consider that. Like
Yeah.
they don't even that wouldn't register in a lot of people's minds, or they wouldn't consider, does my horse, does my mule understand what I'm trying to do? They're just like it's either they're doing it or they're not doing it. They're not, this horse won't load up for me.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking it from that perspective, does my horse understand that I want them to load in the trailer? Do they understand that the trailer is not scary? Yeah, I'm using that example, but that's insightful to have. That's really cool. That's a great thing to even be able to notice at that stage. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, it's always important to me how the horse feels about it. I mean, I feel like that's been on my radar. I don't know.
Mm.
People get involved with horses for lots of different reasons. And the being around the horses and being with the horses always felt like a safe place and a really good place. And so if I'm going to feel good about being with them, I want them to feel good about being with me.
Yeah, I like that. That feel. You and I hear that word and we talk that word a lot in this you know, corner of horsemanship. But really, that feel, how they feel around you, and when they're doing whatever it is we're doing, and let's face it, at the end of the day, we need to get something done,
Hmm.
right? Okay, well the cows are out, Emily. Go get the cow. You got to go get the cows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I get it. We got to get something done, but it can be, you know, different ends of the spectrum depending on how your horse feels while you're doing that. I've been on horses and mules that I know they loved it. Like they
Yeah.
did. They just dug it. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're doing something." I have mules that I know for sure that they love going out on a trail ride. I
Hmm.
know it.
Hmm.
I've been on plenty that I knew they didn't. You know, and that concerns me. That
Hmm.
concerns me, It bothers me when they don't feel good about the things I want to do. And I get it. There's plenty of macho attitudes out there, or warrior attitudes, as my mentor Martin Black would say. The warrior in you, where it's like, hey, my way or the highway. You know, but um, but that never did fit me.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
even I remember even as a younger kid, I'd get in plenty of fights with my horses and mules.
Hmm.
And I guess under definition, you could say, well, I won. Well, I only won because it was a fight.
Hmm.
And nowadays it's that's the last thing I want. And
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that kind of trouble. And I remember even as a young man that it concerned me how they, even if I got them to cross that water, well, I did it and I got across, by golly, but I could see the trouble in the
Hmm.
animal, and that always made me feel pretty guilty.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
didn't come away from that like feeling great,
Good.
like
Yeah.
I'm a great trainer. I accomplished something. I never had that feel. And I know some people do get that feel, like
Hmm.
that is what gratifies them. Like, oh, I got it done. But that never did fit me, and it sounds like it's the same thing for you. That kind of stuff just didn't fit you.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely more of I mean, and probably like a little bit to the other end of the spectrum where, you know, I've had people get on horses that I've ridden and say, "Oh, like you sort of hid that real like I can ride like I want to ride around the trouble almost too much where I
Mm,
will not always, I can sort of I can get around that little spot because I can feel it and I will not, so I'm probably a little bit the other end of the spectrum. And that's, I mean, I think that sort of, yeah, I don't want to cause trouble. Like that's sort of my, how I feel about all things. Like how can we figure out how to get done what we need to get done without causing trouble? And like my mom's an incredible teacher. She worked with kids who didn't know how to read. Like she was reading specialist, and
mm,
and her stories of thinking about ways to get kids who are sort of shut down invested in learning. I think that those stories from the very beginning really, were part of that, narrative in my life of like, well, how can I find a way to get the horse excited about what I'm doing, or my kid, or like without having it to be sort of the like oppressive
yeah.
way. And yeah, and then feel that sort of investment in the process as opposed to feeling like a dictator.
Yeah, that's a fine line though, huh? Because um, there's no growth in the comfort zone,
Yeah.
and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So, on one hand, you're right. You could go too far that way to where you don't ever ask the horse or the mule anything because you don't want to get them upset. But you also need to understand, right, that stress is a part of learning.
Hmm.
Like, but it's mitigating that stress. It's like finding that sweet spot, the balance in the stress. And I think that's what any good horseman or woman is good at doing is, okay, how much gas do we pour on the fire here? Um, without blowing them up, but also you have to start the fire, right? Like
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
want to cook the food here, we got to start the fire, but don't make too big of a fire, don't burn the food. So, to use that analogy, um, because I think probably in my profession, I deal with way more people on that far end sides where
Hmm.
and I call it survival by avoidance.
Hmm. Yeah.
They're
Yep.
like, actually, it happens all the time, Emily. People will come to my clinics and I'll push them
Hmm.
to work on something. And and it's surprising how often a little bit of trouble sometimes comes from it.
Hmm.
And way back when, it used to really bother me. I'm like, how come I don't want to get them in trouble? I don't want to get them. But now I see it with a little different perspective because these
Hmm.
people will come and they'll push to work on something, maybe a better quality backup. Maybe, actually, a better example is transitions.
Hmm.
Transitions, that gets them because, I'll say, all right, let's trot. And you see the people, the eyes get big, like, I'm a trail rider. I don't trot. I don't do that. And they get a little bothered and we're going to trot. And they push their mule or the horse into the trot, and then that mule or horse starts tossing its head. Maybe a little crow hop comes out of it, and they're like, well, they've never done that before. I'm like, well, when's the last time you ever asked them to trot? And they
Yeah.
say, this is the first time. So, you know, people can say, well, I don't get in trouble with my animals. I'm like, okay, well, but how much do you ask of them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a balance there. It's just like, you and I both parents raising kids. It's really not about raising kids. We're actually raising future adults. We're
Yeah.
not raising children. We're raising future adults. And I've somebody told me that a long time ago, and that's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. And what they meant by it is prepare them for adulthood, for the stresses that come with adulthood. I remember being a kid and wanting to grow up so bad. And now I'm like, I just want to be a kid so bad.
I know, right? We just
But
go back to that part.
yes, it was so good. Life was so good. It is great. It is better now. But it's funny because the stresses that do come with life. You and I work with horses and mules, and we both run businesses, and we're spouses and parents, and pay the taxes and pay the bills. Like there's a lot of stresses. And if as a kid, if all we ever did was be coddled as a child and never stressed a little bit, then we're going to grow up and be like, holy cow, this is rough. This is
Yeah.
really rough. But if you get a little responsibility, it makes a difference. Like right now, we're in the middle of, we're recording this in the wintertime. This isn't going to come out till spring, Emily, but, um, it's January right now, right? Every day, got to go check those waters, make sure they're not froze up, feed. It's cold, got to shovel snow, throw
Carrying the firewood. Yeah.
all the things that are hard. I think wintertime makes you tough. It really does. But, every day one of my girls has to help me feed, and we feed kind of, you know, uh, like feeding cows in the pasture. That's how we feed our meals. We load it up and go spread it out in the pasture.
Hmm.
And then one of the girls has to water, and it just alternates every day. And it's hard. And like, yesterday, it's 2 degrees. And they're like, Dad, do I really have to? I'm like, well, your mules and your horses, they got to eat and they got to drink. What if we don't do this? Like, let's say we just don't. How does your horse feel out there? In LA, she's got a little pony. She's like, yeah, we better go
Uh-huh.
feed. I'm like,
Gotta
yeah,
feed the
of course
pony.
we do. Like, it's just life. But I think those stresses make the child turn into an adult. And I think it's the same thing with horses.
Hmm.
Of course, it's managing that stress. So of course, I'm not going to make my kid go out there all day in 2 degrees. No, it's 20 minutes. We can
Yeah.
go do the chores in 20 minutes. Yep, your fingers are going to get cold. Yep. Are they going to fall off? Nope. You're not going to
Yeah.
get frostbite out there that quick. You're going to be okay, right? So it's kind of mitigating that stress. I think that's really important as a horseman to pay
Yeah.
attention to.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you were talking about with the students and the transitions. And I think like you hit on such a important part there about having somebody who you trust and whose judgment that you have good faith in helping you through those
Hmm.
that stress. Because if you're somebody like me, yeah, you'll avoid sort of bringing that to the surface. But if you have somebody who you go, I know that they have seen this movie before, it's going to work out for me, then I can push myself because I've got that encouragement. So that's a good a good thing to have in your life, is somebody to help you through that.
Yeah, it helps to have somebody around you that
Yeah.
you can borrow a little confidence from.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
You
great way to think
know,
about it. Yeah.
like, can I just borrow a little dose of that confidence? Yep, here you go. You can do, sometimes that's all it takes is you can do this. I remember, uh, when I was rodeoing, riding broncs, my coach in college was Louis Field. And in fact, when we get off this episode here, I got an interview with Casey. And anyways, I remember that there were times when, I drew something really rank. And I was fairly confident, but it's easy. Your confidence can get shaken. And I remember I drew something pretty rough, and Louis just saying, "You can ride this horse." Yeah, like no, you can do this. You can
Hmm.
do this. I'm like, all right, yeah. He says I can do it. I can do it. If Louis told me I could jump from here to the moon, I'd believe him. Because he was that mentor to me.
Hmm.
He was that person I could borrow my confidence from.
Hmm.
And I knew it because also I knew that if he said, "Ty, bear down, you're not going to ride this horse,"
You
I
knew.
I would believe him too. I knew he wasn't BSing me,
Yeah.
So you're right. Having somebody that can say, you know what, this is going to work out. And then also like in the horsemanship world and with working on things with your horses and your mules, you're right. There's us as teachers that we've seen it.
Hmm.
This isn't like you said, you saw the movie before. This is nothing new. You're fine. Yep. You got to work through this. Here's the instructions. Follow it. You'll be fine. It'll be no big deal.
Or like, I had I started the one colt, and then the next horse I had was a big challenge. He came with a lot of baggage, and that's a whole other story. But one time I was roping, I rode in a Dave and Gwen Weaver clinic, and I mean it was a big deal for me to rope cattle off of this horse. It was a big deal for him. It was really a big deal for me. But having Dave right there with me, and even like I, rim fired him a little bit, but he knew how to like he kept me safe, he kept himself safe, he kept the whole situation from being a really bad deal. But I wouldn't have ever done something like that with anybody but him who
Yeah.
could keep me out of trouble. Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you get to play with cows very often these days? Do you get to rope
Not
much?
not really. That was a time when they were coming out to do clinics pretty regularly, and I had a place to go where I could do that. I haven't done that with the horse I've got now. I haven't done much with cattle at all, but I do enjoy it. It was super fun and really helped that horse that I had a lot. It made some really big changes in him.
There's certain things you can do, certain like activities you can do with your horse that just like quadruples the training sometimes, maybe
Yeah.
5 times the training. And I think working cattle is one of those things. You can go out and spend 3 or 4 hours working cows, even if you're just trailing them on the mountain. I mean,
Hmm.
just trailing them to their summer pasture. And is I swear it's equivalent to days in the arena.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Days and days in the arena. Like yesterday, I went down to southern Utah and we just rode for the day. We're lucky, only 3.5 hours away. So we left and it was so cold, leaving. And we get down there and it's in the 50s, you know. It's
You're
so
like,
much warmer down
yay.
there. It's
Yeah.
only three hours away. And so, anyways, we went down the road for the day, and we did like 8 or 9 miles. It
Hmm.
wasn't like major, but I took a young mule we got, and those hours in the saddle working through those rocks, we went and played in the rocks and stuff, and working through the rocks and the canyons. Man, like especially this time of year, I couldn't have got that riding days and days and days and days and days here in my arena,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
Just it's so good, and cows are like that. It's so
Yeah.
good. So I always tell all my students, anytime you can go out and do real using things, it's so good for them.
Yeah. Oh, well, that same horse, I took him to one of Buck's 10-day clinics at the ranch back when he was doing those clinics. And I literally woke up every morning thinking I was going to die. Okay, whatever we do today is the day I'm going to die. We're loping on the side of the mountain through the sagebrush, definitely going to die. Like all the things. And and I didn't
Yeah.
die. And by the end of that time, Like it took that much to get that horse and me on that horse to finally like let down and make some, I mean, like that set us up to be able to to have a future together where we could both relax and feel good about things. But I don't think that I mean, we both had to really be pushed, and
Mhm.
that outside time made all the difference in the world. And I wouldn't have done it without, being pushed to do those things, because it was too scary. Yeah. But
That's a
yeah.
gr- that's a great point. That's such a great point. Your relationship too. Um, I get so many people come to the clinics and they want a relationship. They want they want that, and they'll use all kinds of words, right? Relationship, connection, whatever, partnership. All these words, right? And I tell them, think about people in your life. Like, think about whether it's a spouse, a friend, a parent, partner, whatever, business partner. It could be all kinds of things, right? And when did your relationship really blossom or grow? And
Hmm.
it's usually after hard times of some kind.
Hmm. That's really,
Like I remember
yeah.
my wife and I when we first got married, everything is hunky dory, life is great, it's so wonderful, right? I had a horse flip over on me and busted up my femur, kicked me in the head, had all kinds of issues from it, and see, that gives me the excuse of why I'm
Wow.
kind of a little bit weird, right? Got kicked in.
Got
No,
kicked in the head. Yeah.
yeah, I got an excuse. But actually, it was really hard on her because she
Hmm.
was my caretaker. I mean, she took care of me. She did everything for me.
Hmm.
Like, so here we are. We had only been married, what? We'd been married about not even 2 years yet.
Oh, wow.
And she
Yeah.
is taking care of me, all the way through. And it was hard. It was really hard on her. And it was hard on me. I had to humble myself actually because I'd
Hmm.
never gotten help before. I don't need help. I don't need nobody's help. That's my attitude. And here I was, I had to be helped by somebody. And it was hard for me to take help. Anyways, that brought us so close together, and but it's kind of like that in a less dramatic way with horses and mules.
Hmm.
Like like yesterday, the country I was riding in was really rough. It was rough. Um, I think about the average student, and I'm not talking down on my students, but the average student that I have, they would be off their horses or their mules and they'd be leading them
Hmm.
on what I was riding this colt down, And I'm not tooting my own horn or trying to, be macho man here. I'm just saying the facts of it. And it is hard. And it is, even for me as a professional, it was stressful. Like, oh, this is a precarious situation. If you don't do this right, there's gonna be pretty high risk here. There's gonna be some consequences if you don't execute this correctly. So it puts the pressure on me to get it right. And it also puts the pressure on the mule to get it right, although they don't realize that at the time. They're just doing their thing. Um, and after a day riding like that, man, I'm like, oh, I love that mule. I love that mule. Such a good colt. He's just a youngster. He's only 5, and I'm like, he's a good boy, and it boosts your confidence. And that's the stuff I try to tell my students too, that, hey, go do like you're talking about, run, you're running across the side of the hill through the sagebrush with buck, and that let's face the fact that's high risk.
Hmm.
I mean, how many people I can tell? I know my daughter's into 4-H here, and these barrel racers and these eventers, and if the ground's not just right, they ain't doing it right. And here you are, you're running across a hill, sagebrush, like you don't need no stinking good ground, right? And but those moments, I think they're important in life. It builds that connection. I tell people, you know, because I think a lot of people want the connection and they'll get it through, or they think they'll get it through. I'll just pet them and I'll just give them a treat and they'll love me. And it's just really hard to tell them, sorry, bud, that's not that's like marrying somebody and you'll stay with them as long as they give you gifts all the time.
Yeah.
At some point the flowers don't do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can say it from wife's perspective. Some point it's not about the flowers. Like, you'd probably like it better if he'd just do his dishes than the flowers, or whatever. But anyways, I think the trials and
Yeah.
the stress, of course, it has to be a measured stress. If you were running across that and it's lava rock,
Yeah.
like up in the Idaho country, okay, now we just took something that was risky and you just made it dangerous, and now it's a little bit too much. Now you really got to be particular, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and to be fair, there were other people there that I watched go first. So I was
There
like
you go.
they survived. Okay, we can do it too. But it made me think of one of the gals that I interviewed. She's a high level dressage rider, and she was talking about she likes to take her horses out and ride them in big storms. And everybody at her barn looks at her like she's crazy. And she's like, yeah, but then they learn that no matter what's going on around, I'm their safe space. And I'm like, oh, I really like that. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I think about so many times that you just have to do that, you
Yeah.
know, and you're
Yeah.
like, I really don't want to be here, but here we are, you know. But that does do a lot. I like that idea too, for the fact that in an average equine in a storm, they're just going to brace up, put their butts to the wind, and they just take it, and they can take it better than we can for sure. They're made for it. We're not, right? We need shelter. They can take it. But there's times when I'm riding that I don't want them to put their butts to the wind and just brace up. Actually, we have to ride head first into the wind because we're moving these cows back to home. And, you know, my buddy used to have a permit for a winter pasture. Well, like a
Mhm.
late fall, early winter pasture. So these cows would go on it basically from October to December 31st. So
Mhm.
it's just a short little come off the mountain, put them on this little pasture before they go home to calve. So December 31st, this means New Year's Eve
You're
or
gathering.
New Year's Day, a lot of times it's New Year's Day, but New Year's Eve, here we are, gather them up and take them home. And oh man, that's always brutal time in Utah. That's so cold.
Yeah.
Um, and I think of when you talk about stuff like that, it makes me remember those times because, you know, you just have to do it. Like you just have to do it. I was talking to Ricky Quinn the other day. We were talking about this, about mindset.
Hmm.
Um, and I think having jobs like that give you an edge because when we had to take the cows home, it we had to do it. Like it's just the way it is. And it was
Hmm.
about 14-mile ride through a canyon, no cell service. So it's not like if I got too cold, I could just call. And in fact, the last time we went, my buddy, it was his cows, he got sick. He was sick. Like I kept looking over him like, man, you okay? Are you all right? And he wasn't okay. He got home and pretty much passed out and he was sick. He was bad, but still he pushed through it. Like
Hmm.
you have to do it. Like we got to get the cows home. This is it. There's no options. Nobody's gonna else is gonna do it. It's just us. And so I think what that person you're talking about, that person going out and doing it when they have the option to do it. There's a there's a podcast I listen to all the time. Andrew Huberman, do you know
Mm-mm.
not him? He's a smart guy. He's one of these doctors, smart guy. And he was talking about the effects that this has on your brain. Like when
Mm.
you do something that you don't want to do, but you don't have to do it, how good it is for you to do it.
Mm.
So like your friend that you're talking about, when she goes out and she's riding in the storm, she doesn't want to ride in the storm, but she does it, but she doesn't have to. That is so good. In fact, that's better on the brain than even my scenario, what I'm talking about, where here it
Where you
is,
have to.
we
Uh-huh.
have to do it. Well, we have to do it. I don't want to, but I have to. I'm going to do it anyways. Anyways, your friend's
Hmm.
scenario is even better on
Hmm.
the mental health side of things. So that's
Okay.
awesome.
I'll have to check that podcast out. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. The more I learn about the minds, the more I just appreciate these animals,
Hmm.
and that's been a big change in my horsemanship and mulemanship. I would say the last 5 years is really considering how they think.
Hmm.
It makes a big difference. It goes back to what you said early on as a child, how you cared how the animal felt. And that's on the same lines, you know. That's mental stuff. You know, that's really deep. Pretty
Yeah.
cool. So so um what got you into like the horsemanship interviewing world? So to where you're now right, you know, you talked about the magazine you worked for before you
hmm
started yours.
hmm
Um, so is that kind of what got you your foothold into the interviewing these people world? Like, did you have to do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I mean, I was um when I was let's see, when I was in high school, I worked on the high school newspaper. So I loved writing. And then my parents moved back to California and I stayed and lived with Mindy Bauer and Kevin Hall. And so then I was riding horses, like Mindy would start horses and then send them home. And then I would like, that's what I did to earn money was I'd go ride the horses that went home, but the people still needed help or, just keep them exercised. So that's what I was doing in high school. And this magazine started up and they actually sent Mindy a letter to see if she would want to, be involved with this Trail Less Traveled magazine. And she just handed it to me. And so I applied for the job as an editor there when I was a senior in high school, which, is sort of, you know, assuming a lot. But a little bit later, they contacted me and said, well, you're a little young to be the editor, but do you want to write some freelance articles?
Mm.
So I did. I just started because I had started Curly in the clinic and I was riding these other horses and it was just it's all I wanted to do was be at the barn and riding horses. That's all I really had an interest in. So I started doing articles for them through high school and college. And then towards the end of my time at college, I was taking journalism. That's what my degree is in journalism, but it wasn't really gelling. Like I had to do an internship at the paper and I don't know, I didn't have a passion for the content. And so I went in to actually quit at the Trail Less Traveled because school was too hectic and they offered me the job as the editor. So as I finished up my degree, I was working full time there and then I was there for 4 more years and I mean, I loved it. I a lot of the relationships I have now got that start in that magazine, and then they were going to switch to an advertising format, and I was told that I would have to do articles with people who bought ads, and so I was, like 24 and very, feisty. And I said, well, no, I'm just going to do my own thing. So I quit and we started Eclectic Horseman and I've been doing that since. So then, as time goes on and things evolve, I mean, the landscape has changed so much. Like when I started at Trail Less Travel, the internet was like just getting started. And now there's all different modalities of sharing information and all that. So the interviewing has just um, grown out of the need to connect in different ways. And like
So
and then we've also been doing the classrooms, which I think
yeah.
um, I need to get you in for one of the classes. But that's just been like the last year, sort of again an outgrowth of the relationships that I've developed with these different sources and like what's a different modality for engaging people in the learning process. And that's been really fun and exciting because I have somebody sharing information and then we open it up for questions and people ask the best questions. Like I love it when it's like, okay, well, they're thinking about this thing that I wasn't even thinking about. And it opens up this whole other line of inquiry that I never would have even thought of.
Oh, I love questions.
Yeah.
I love questions, you know, b because questions lead to learning, you
hmm
know, and one person's question can provoke thoughts in you that will provoke another question that will provoke somebody else's thoughts and their questions. It's never ending. Questions are so important, you know. I want to go back a little bit though, Emily. So, the title of your magazine is so unique. In fact, when I very first saw your magazine, I had to look up the word eclectic because I thought, actually, at first, like, you just glance at the magazine. I was like, Electric Horseman. What's that? And I was like, wait,
Yeah.
no, that's not
Well,
electric.
and the bank does cash checks made to Electric Horseman because you're not alone in, in misreading that. So,
All those dyslexic people. Like, oh.
yeah.
So anyway, tell us about that. Like,
Um,
first, you better define it for all my
yeah.
listeners, and
So,
then why you chose it.
okay. So eclectic means taking from a variety of sources, but only the best.
Mhm.
And some days I think it was not the best marketing choice to choose a title that people have to look up to learn a new word. But then, I mean, there's a part of me that says if someone isn't willing to learn a new word, then probably what we're doing is not going to be about them anyway. And because really the mission of what we do is about broadening your horizons and asking questions and engaging in the learning process and all of those things. So it you know it so how we got that name is I was working for a Trail Less Traveled, and I was pretty frustrated and not really wanting to stay. If I was going to, I'm sort of like, don't boss me around. Like that's sort of like, don't tell me what to do. So I didn't want to be told who I had to do articles with. And I was venting at the kitchen table. I kept my horse down at Mindy's, and I would drive back and forth from Boulder to Kiowa to ride. And at the kitchen table was Verlin Klinkenberg and Lindy Smith. Lindy Smith did that really cool Straight West book of photos. I don't know if you've seen that. And Verlin was like an editor at the New York Times, and I was, complaining about what was going on, and he actually named it. It was his name. He said, "I think you should, do your own magazine and call it Eclectic Horseman," and and the name stuck, and we've been doing that ever since.
I like that. Yeah, I think it's actually good because I had to learn a new word,
Yeah,
and I think it's good. And that's the whole point of your magazine is learning. So,
yeah, yeah,
you know what? Because it is a deeper magazine. It is. It's not necessarily a magazine that you would probably sell at the local grocery store because
hmm,
that's probably not it. You know what I mean? I appreciate it because you open it up and you're going to learn something. It's good. It's really good.
yeah.
So I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Um,
I had some great feedback from, I mean, we have the best subscribers because they'll call me up and say, like, I like this, I didn't like this, you got to check this person out. Like, I really get great feedback. And this one gal called and was talking to Steve, and she said, when I first got it, I looked at the things and I thought, I don't really even understand what's going on here. And but I just hung on to the magazine, and then I circled back, and in not too much time I started to go, oh, I can understand what this person is talking about. And that's, I hope that people, and I get that feedback from other folks too, is, I got the magazine, and at the time what was in that article was not relevant to what I was working, the horse I had, or what I was working on. But I read it, and then as time went on, I came back, and that little piece of information was just what I needed. And so I hope that people look at it as a reference.
I highly recommend to people. Um, I'm just gonna say, don't be lazy. Don't be lazy because it's so easy when you pick up material like that and you don't understand it. Um, a lot of people go, "Nah, I don't need that." Um, and I use this example. So I was at a mule sale here in Utah last year, and I was talking to some buyers there. And if I hang out around the sale pens too much, I have a flock of people, and they're asking me my opinion, like which mule, which mule, which mule, right? They think that I know like the best mule. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to these mules. Like I'm not here to buy. You know what I mean? Anyways, but what actually disturbed me a little bit was a conversation I was having with a buyer, and we were watching a seller work his mule out there. He was out there doing turns on the haunches, working on some lead changes. He was side passing and leg yielding and doing some haunches in. Some really good stuff, especially for the mule world.
Hmm.
And the person I was there watching with, this potential buyer, he's like, I don't need all that fancy stuff. And I'm like, what do you mean fancy stuff? He's like, all that I don't need none of that stuff. I'm like, and it kind of sparked a little bit of a conversation there. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? What's your ultimate goal with your mule? What are you trying to do? He's like, I just trail ride. And I hear that whenever I hear those words together, it usually bugs me. I just trail ride. Like trail riding is like a cop out. Like I don't have to work on that stuff because I just trail ride. It's like my license to be ignorant or naive. And and I was trying to say, hey, um, these are things that are important. I get so many emails and phone calls and text messages about, hey, my horse spooked and ran off. My horse bugged me off. My horse won't do this, won't do that. My mule won't do this, do that. And actually what I've put together, Emily, and this is what I'm getting back to your magazine, is what I've figured out is when people say things like that, it's almost a cover up and like a mask so that they don't feel bad for not knowing how to do things.
Hmm.
Like it's our human inclination when we see something we don't understand,
Hmm.
it's like our inclination to discount it. Like
Hmm.
if you don't understand, you're like, nah, that's dumb. I don't need that.
Yeah.
You know, um, and I always use the example of I bought a truck in 2015. It was the first time I ever bought a new truck, and it had, well, in fact, it's the only new truck I've ever bought in my life. Still now, I still got it. So that's it. That's the only new
Hang
one I've
on
ever
to
been.
it. No,
Yeah, I
yeah.
still got it.
Yeah.
But I remember visiting with the salesman at the dealership, and he's showing me all these buttons. It had, heated seats and heated steering wheel, and even had air conditioned seats, right? And he's showing me all, and I've never had any of this stuff. I drove forever. I drove a 1994 Ford pickup that was just, forever. And I'm like, I don't need that. He's like, and you know, it was cold. And he said, check this out, turn on that heated steering wheel. I'm like, oh yeah, this is nice, and he's showing me all these, things. And I didn't think I ever needed that stuff. And I don't necessarily need it, but it sure is nice. It
Yeah.
sure is nice. And once I kind of understood it, I'm like, this is awesome. And it's like a side pass.
Hmm.
I think like a lot of the trail riders, I don't need that. I don't need that side pass. What do I need that for? And how many of them do you see that have to go to a semi truck turn to line up for a picture? They gotta
Yeah.
go clear around and say, hold on, check this out. This is kind of nice. Um, and I think it's just because they don't understand, and so like when they come across, well, at least for me, when I come across something that is deeper than my current understanding, um, it has even been my inclination to say I don't need that in the past. But nowadays, when I come across something that I don't understand, I go, "Whoa, hold on. I need to figure this out.
Hmm.
What is this?" Especially when it pertains to, to horses and mules. Like, I guess I could still be guilty of it when it comes to technology or something, or
Yeah.
electronics or the this or that, I'm like, yeah, that's not me. Um, but I'm interested in mules and horses,
Hmm.
and it's part of my life. So when I come across stuff like you're talking about, I go, okay, I'm gonna read it. I'm just gonna read it as it is, and I'm not necessarily gonna try to understand it as I'm reading it. Just read it, and then I like to take time and just ponder about it and
Hmm.
just think, what is going on here? Um, The biggest challenge for me with learning in the equine world is the big difference in vocabulary
Hmm.
between the Western world, the English world, and then the world I come from, the Great Basin world.
Hmm.
There's a lot of difference in words that we use, and how we do all three of those things could be describing the same exact movement.
Hmm.
and using completely different vocabulary, you know. There's a turn on the haunches, or there's a turnaround, or turn on the hinds, or roll the hinds, roll the front. Like there's so many different, and it's all like the same. It's all like the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, I know. And I had the same proofreader for like 25 years, and she finally retired, and then trying to have a new proofreader step in, and she's like, now wait, which is the right what, I'm like, oh gosh, there's so many things that you as a horse person, you just intuitively go, oh, I know that
Mm.
this is the same as this. But then to have to explain to a non-horse person, you go, oh my gosh, we have to develop our own little like cheat sheet of these things mean this thing, and it's okay to use these words interchangeably but not these words. And but yeah, that does, it makes a challenge for teaching and for sharing ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the cool people you've got to meet. I think that's been like a huge blessing in your life is to meet so many
Yeah.
great people. And I told you before we hit record, one of my favorite investigations in life is traits of the greats, I call it.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
what makes them great? Well, what makes them successful? What makes them, and you see so many different people. I want to talk about some of the traits of the greats. And if you
Hmm.
have certain people or stories that have really taught you these principles, feel free to share them.
That's a tough question. Because like defining what great is
Yeah.
sort of depends on who you what you're talking about. So like great teachers, great horsemen, great because most of the folks that I work with, they're not competitors. So like we're not defining their
Yep.
greatness by what they've achieved in that way. But um, I would say, the I am really lucky that I get to choose who I work with. And if I am not working with somebody, like I don't have to work with people that I don't find pleasant being around. I mean, like that's, I would
Mm.
say, or find them having merit of things to share. That's not really the right way to say that. I would say, on the whole, the people that I work with, like, it's not just about the horses, right? Like, they
Yeah. Yeah.
also, how they treat other people
Yep.
is indicative of what kind of human being they are. And so that, I mean, like a lot of the times, like my husband's not a horse person. He's a computer guy, he's a graphic designer, he's incredibly talented at what he does. And a lot of times when he goes with me places, like how the sources, how the people that I work with like treat him is very indicative of,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
how,
Yes.
if they're kind and engaging, like that tells me a lot about what kind of person they are. And that's a good little clue. And I would say that the people that I work with, like when I feel good asking them questions and feel good being around them, like I can ask them any question and they're not going to make me feel bad for asking a question. Like I go, that has to carry over into like, how I feel. That has to be like how their horses feel, like where they're not being, like scared or uncomfortable or unsure. Like you just feel like, hey, I can ask you anything and you're just going to answer me. And I don't have to feel like I'm going to look dumb if I ask this question, or I'm going to, when they create that space around them, I feel like that translates in all the aspects that they do. And
That's
then I
so
would
good. Yeah.
also say that like the people that I love working with have a genuine childlike joy of learning and being around horses. Like
Mm.
there's no faking that. Like there's like they are having fun doing what they do and they are excited about it. And that genuineness I feel like is, you can't manufacture that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, a story that comes to mind. Um, it- Martin Black has been a great mentor to me. I've learned a lot from that guy, but I'm sure I annoy him. I know I annoy him much, very much so, because he got to spend a lot of time around Tom Dorrance,
Mhm,
a lot of time. And so anytime I'm around Martin, I'm like, well, tell me about Tom, because I didn't get to spend any time around Tom Dorrance.
mhm,
Tom Dorrance fascinates me.
mhm,
There's a lot of people in the horsemanship world that are polarizing,
mhm,
that people either talk really good about or they really don't like.
mhm,
But not Tom.
mhm,
Tom was not polarizing. I have not met anybody yet that has
mhm,
anything negative to say about Tom Dorrance.
mhm.
Nobody, you know, and that fascinates me. I wish I could have known the guy. I want to know that guy so bad. I want to,
Yeah.
and so I remember Martin told me a story once about Tom and how he dealt with negative speaking.
Mhm,
Martin would say, him and the other guys, they'd be around and if somebody got to talking negative about another person, about a horse, about anything really, just general complaining, whining, bickering, or back talking. It's just things like that. He said Tom was so good at subtly changing the conversation,
mhm,
changing the subject. He was smooth. And Martin tells me that, he says, and Tom was just as good at doing that as he was with changing the subject with his horses when his horses got in trouble.
mhm,
That it was just smooth. He was just a smooth operator. Horse gets troubled, no problem. Subject changed, and we're good to go. And he said he did the same thing with humans. And it's just so it's traits like that that fascinate me. Because like you're saying, does it carry over into life? And to me, when if I had to define somebody that is great, I'm talking about somebody that, yeah, they're successful in their horsemanship world, but also they're a good parent. They're a
mhm,
good father. They're a good husband, um, mother, wife. They're good. You know, um, Coming from the rodeo world, I spent a lot of time rodeoing. It's interesting because I knew a lot of people that were extremely successful in the arena that I didn't want to hang out with after the rodeo. You know what I mean?
mhm,
I was not going to go hang out with those guys.
mhm,
I knew others that were extremely successful in that field. And then also, you're like, man, I would love to go hang out with you on the ranch. I would love to go to dinner with you. You know what I mean? And be around those people, and they could turn around and not only were they somebody's successful with horses or with rodeo or with anything, but they can turn around and be successful in business.
mhm.
Take the same standards and apply to their life. So I like how you made that definition there for me too. I appreciate that because I think that does need to have carryover because I guess pretty much everybody I've ever met that maybe they were really good with a horse doesn't necessarily mean that they were good with other things in
Mhm.
life. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing to highlight, I would say too, is I had the opportunity to go out and film with David Hillman and Gene Armstrong, who just recently passed away.
Mm.
And those watching those two guys start colts together has been one of the highlights of my um, information gathering experience,
Yeah.
because it was so different to see two very accomplished people working together and sharing things in a collaborative way. And I feel like that must have been like when people talk about going to work with Tom, um, sort of that egoless kind of like exploration of what's best for the horse.
Yeah.
Like it's not about me telling you what to do. It's about saying, "Hey, let's figure this out together." And I feel like that mindset is super valuable.
Oh yeah, I'm writing that down right now. That's so good. You know, and that's really the discovery. Like me as a teacher, that's what I want. And I'll often tell people this, because a lot of people show up and they have their notes. They're going to take notes, and I'll often say this. I say, don't write down necessarily what you hear me say. Write down what you feel when I
Mm,
say it, um, or when you see it.
mhm,
I think that's so important. And that's to me that's the real learning. Um, and yes, I mean, like I'm writing down what you just said, but like when you're in those moments of around horses or around mules, um, I think the insight comes not necessarily from what you're hearing being spoken, but what you feel, what comes to your mind, you know. I'm huge on following your thoughts.
Hmm.
Granted, your thoughts are in a good place.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I better
yeah,
put that caveat on it
yeah.
because there's plenty of times like, oh, no, no, no. But
Yeah.
you know, just follow your thoughts, right? Like
Hmm.
what comes to mind, do it. If, you know, I'm big on following promptings. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like if
Yeah.
you're going to be good with horses and mules, you got to be good with following your promptings. And some people
Hmm.
call that gut feeling.
Hmm.
Some people call it, you know, things that come to their mind. Some call it the spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
I'm big on that. Like,
Hmm.
if I have a feeling I should do this, I'm going to do it. You know, especially if it's good. Like, if I have a feeling to do something with an animal, I'm just going to do it. You know, unless it's something like, man, I'd love to, you know, if you get the thought like, man, I'd love to smack you right now. Well, probably
Don't
don't
do
do
that. Yeah.
that one, you know,
Yeah.
and but if it's just good, like, you know, I wanted to work on this right now, but I feel I'm having the thought that I should do this instead.
Mhm.
Or I'm having the thought that maybe I shouldn't ask you anything right now. Maybe I should just ride you and just walk for a minute. And
Mhm.
I think people need to get in tune with that.
But don't you feel like that's part of the process, right? Like when you start your journey, you're seeing something in somebody else that you admire, and you
Yeah, yeah.
see like, I love how their horses look, or I love how they ride, and so you get sort of hooked on to what they've got going on. And then over time, like you're adding to that, and then but like you can't you have to sort of start in that. I mean, at least in my experience,
Yeah.
I feel like people start there, and then over time you're starting to evolve in your own journey and adding to the tools that become available to you, and then you can start to really develop that gut instinct or the prompting. I've not heard that term before, but I like that. And where you start to have enough base knowledge and experience, like the experience is so huge, to be able to then you're making it you're making horsemanship your own or mulemanship your own, because you've got this experience, you have these tools, and now I can start to say, I'm not thinking about what so and so would do. I'm thinking about me with my horse in this situation. This is what is the thing that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so good, Emily. That's so good. You know, like getting back to, you know, the traits of the greats, you know, basically we could you throw the word principles. There's principles that all these greats use. And those principles, if it's a real principle, it should be able to flow over into life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you've heard this many times. The granddaddy of all principles, make the right thing easy, wrong thing difficult, right? That's the classic number one principle in horsemanship. I tell my students, you know, if you come to this class and the only thing you ever remember is right thing easy, wrong thing difficult, even at the most caveman level of it, like even the most basic level of it, if that's all you get, you're gonna get along better than if you didn't practice that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, you know, yes, if you can show up and you learn these basic principles, um, and you utilize them, you know, like a principle that I really hammer on is be what you want your mule or your horse to become. Be what
Mm-hmm.
you want them to become. You could apply that to raising kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be the type of adult that I want my kids to grow up to be. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if I want them to be honest and be true and be virtuous, I better be those things. So there's principles like that that I feel like that's what people really need to show up for and pay attention to. Because let's face it, all right, you want to teach a horse to back up, teach a mule to back up. All right, there's a whole bunch of different ways. Like, and all of them kind of work at some level or the other, obviously, or else the animal wouldn't be backing up. Now, there's better and there's worse in my opinions, right? But the principle of it, going back to like let's make the right thing easy, wrong thing difficult. that is the foundation of getting that movement. And then you can use those promptings like, you know, okay, I'm riding along here and my mules feels really forward, right? 'Cause they kind of want to go that way. Um, Probably a bad idea to ask them to back up away from that, but maybe I'll back up to it.
Hmm.
They sure seem to want to go toward the gate. So, like in this example, I see so many people fight that. I'm like, no, I'm going to use it. They want to go to the gate so bad. Cool. I'm going to back up toward the gate. I'm going to side pass toward the gate. I'm going to do my turnarounds toward the gate. I'm going to do everything toward the gate and at least get something good out of this mess, you know. But I think that, anyways, those are the things that I look for, from the traits of the greats,
Hmm.
those gems like that. I haven't had the chance to be around Brian Newbert
Hmm.
personally. I've because of you, I've got to see a lot of his teachings, and I'm so grateful for what you put out there because that's a guy that I also kind of want to emulate. One of my favorite things about him is his faith.
Hmm.
Um, he's always recognizing a higher being,
Hmm.
and he's so big on, you know what, this horse, this is a this is one of God's creations.
Hmm.
Treat it that way. Be good, this is important. And that has given me such a deep perspective. Um, and I talk to my students, and I have students of all kinds of faiths and not, all
Hmm.
kinds of, and so do you, right? You got people all over the board. And whatever their faith is, that's not the point. But the point that I make to them is this is, this horse, this mule, this is a living, breathing, thinking, considering being. This thing is alive. It's alive. It has a soul. It has a mind. Um, it's not a tool. It's not a Kubota tractor. It's not a four-wheeler. So, and people, being around people like Brian Newbert, like you get to be around. Those are some things that he brings to the table that I think is fascinating. And anyways, that's the kind of stuff I really like,
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
goes beyond everything.
Yeah. Well, you got to find a way to get to his place because their place in Alturas is just amazing and super cool country to ride in. And like Patty's the greatest hostess, and they're just,
Yeah.
I just like going and spending time there because they're just wonderful to be around.
But maybe you'll be my connection. You'll be the
Okay.
you'll be my in. I can say, hey, I'm friends with Emily, and then it'll help me get in there on
Yeah.
that. But yeah, do you got any experiences that you'd like to share that have really impacted your horsemanship? Is there any moments in your horsemanship journey that were turning points? You already mentioned one early on.
Yeah, let's see. Going to starting Curly was huge. Like that was a huge experience and opened so many doors and such a path. And then the next horse I got, Bellic, like he was really he had come from a like anyway, he came with a ton of baggage, had gotten the saddle under his belly and was just sort of left at Mindy's and then he became my horse and I learned so much from that
Yeah.
and having to work with a horse that has that kind of negative experience. It's not something I'd want to do at almost 50, but in my 20s, it was huge for me because I learned so much from a horse that had that much trouble
Mm.
that I just there was like tons of valuable lessons in that, and I'm glad that I don't have a horse that's like that now. But that experience was huge for me. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many there's so many things.
I know.
I can't think of anything else in particular. That same horse, like he was scary. Like he bucked every time I saddled him for like 5 years, like really bucked. And he was like 17 hands, thoroughbred
Yeah.
Shire cross. Like it was for
Mm.
somebody who's already sort of scared, it was a lot. And I remember like Mindy saying, like, how do you think it feels to him that you're scared of him all the time? and
Mm.
we did a night ride, like a full moon night ride in the snow, which again was one of those like I'm certainly going to die experiences, but that was also a big change for me thinking about how he really didn't want to die. He didn't want to get in a jam so bad that he was going to kill us both, and starting to learn to trust his judgment a little bit more by riding out in the prairie on the snow in the moonlight was a big memorable moment.
Oh yeah. I like that insight. How do you think they feel when you're scared of them? I mean,
Yeah.
we need to consider that because that's a certain feel that you're putting out. You know, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Something else I wanted to ask you about. This is kind of a little bit of a change of the subject slightly, but uh, you have been a part of this. I would say this. In fact, you are part of it in a way of sharing it. This renaissance, so to speak, of this style of horsemanship. You go out to all these places in the middle of nowhere, and you're digging up this culture of horsemanship um, that for a long time it was kind of lost a little bit, and there's been plenty of the like we talked about the Tom Dorrances and the Ray Hunts and these others that have brought this to the world, and you're reaching it on a whole different scale with what you do. But what are you seeing in the horse industry, in this culture of horse industry? What are you seeing the future being like? I mean, is the future bright? Like for me, I am more excited now than I've ever been. I have more people interested in this. I'm bringing a whole different section of people into the world. I'm bringing all these mule people that, I mean, they never even heard of a buckaroo.
Hmm.
I tell, they say, you a cowboy? I'm like, no, I'm a buckaroo. They're like, that sounds weird. It's a funny name. Like, is that like a kangaroo something? No, no, no. And but so I'm really excited because more people
Hmm.
they're interested. I mean, I have all these students that are wanting to make bridal mules,
Yeah.
which is so cool. That's not a thing. People don't that's not common, and anyways, what are you seeing in this horse world with this culture and things like this?
I think people really long for authenticity, and I think that that is what
Mm,
even horse people who are living in places where they aren't going to have the opportunities like you talked about, moving cattle or doing a job or things like that, like the authenticity of the working relationship with a horse is
mm,
something that people it resonates with people. They recognize it as real. And I think a lot of people, like I made a joke one time about chore people versus non-chore people. And like there's people who their connection to the real world is through their horses, and they're not really having that connection in other aspects of their life. They might go to an office job, live in an apartment, like those sorts of things. But then when they go spend time with their horse, like or volunteer at a barn or ride a lesson horse, like that's their connection to the real world. And so I feel like there's always going to be a place for this kind of horsemanship because it's real. I mean, there's
yeah.
no other way to talk about it except for it means something to the horse or the mule. It means something to the people. It's not fake.
Yeah, that's so good. Um, are you seeing because you're at the forefront of this education. I mean, your magazine, your DVDs, well, I guess now it's a lot of it's online. I get the online version of Horseman's Gazette, but
Yeah.
um, are you seeing more people being interested in this? What's your student base like?
But right now, I feel like I mean, we definitely have a lot of folks that are getting older, and that is a concern. And so I do think about ways to reach young people, and I feel like I mean, the threshold to get involved with horses, I feel like and it might just be my experience here in Colorado, but it's harder. I mean,
Mm,
when I was a kid, I could live next door to a barn and clean stalls and have a horse to ride. And so that threshold for getting involved pretty easy as far as just putting in the time.
Yeah.
Things are more expensive. Land is in shorter supply. Like all of those pressures, I feel like add barriers to people getting involved. But I feel like that connection, like, we've got some neighbor kids that come visit their grandparents who are neighbors, and my daughter and I were out riding on the road, and they saw us riding, and you could just see from like far away, like their eyes got big, and they came over and they were like, they just wanted to see the horses and pet the horses. And I was like, well, I have a pony that's, sort of retired. Do you want to come brush Billy Bob? And like, you could just see the light in their eyes, and they just want to be around horses. So like those moments really make me feel like wherever there's horses and there's young people, there's going to be those people that it resonates with. And so we just keep lighting providing a place for the spark to happen, to get people involved with horses, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I hope it continues. I hope there's people that continue the interest in it. My clinics, as well as probably your clientele, yeah, they are getting a little older. They are getting a little older. It's interesting to see the different demographics of business, though.
Mhm.
Like this podcast right here, the average listener is 30s and 40s,
Hmm.
whereas my average clinic attendee is 60 and 70 actually. That's my
Mhm.
average clinic attendees is 60s,
Mhm.
which is interesting. And like my video library, that's 40s and 50s. It's a little younger. So, I think like you putting your Horseman's Gazette on digital
Mhm.
instead of people can still get their DVD if they want, right? But
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
digital version of it, it's so awesome because there's so many people, younger people, they're like, DVD, what's that? You
I
know,
know.
let alone
Right.
VHS. You say VHS and they're like, never heard of it. Never
Yeah.
heard of it. But so I think, things you're doing is good in your online classroom. So good. That's so
Yeah.
good to reach a different type of people for sure.
Well, and we had one class where we had somebody, we have them at like 6 o'clock Mountain Time, and we
Yep.
had folks on from Ireland, South Africa, and New Zealand. And then, and then people from all over the states at the same time. And it was like, this
Mhm.
is the coolest thing ever. Like, we're around the world all in the same virtual classroom, and, all horse crazy people that are interested in learning more. I love it.
hmm Pretty cool. Well, I appreciate what you do for the horsemanship and the mulemanship world. Keep up the good work. I love it. It's great. One last thing at the end of all my shows, I ask for a word of advice to give to the listeners today. And it could be anything. It could be life advice. It could be a horsemanship advice. It could be family advice. Anything you got. What if you had a chance to tell the person the one thing, which I know that's hard to narrow down, what would it be?
uh, you better have fun. I
Yeah.
guess. I mean, you know what? You better be having fun with whatever you're doing,
Mm.
whether when you're being a parent, when you're doing your chores, when you're at your job. I mean, you better find a way to make it fun, because life's too short if it's not.
Hey, that's awesome. That's hit the nail on the
So,
head. Yeah, this
yeah,
should be fun. Find joy in the journey.
yeah,
Find joy
yeah.
in the journey. And it's interesting, fun. Here's an interesting thought. And I'm going to close out the show. But like, it's funny what fun really is because I've had a lot of fun. I mean, I've been pretty blessed. Most of my life has been fun. Let's face it. I got a pretty good gig. Being a buckaroo and cowboy and teacher, I have fun all the time. However, the funnest times that I remember were actually the hardest times.
Mhm.
Like I remember in your state, Colorado, I did a big pack trip into the West Elk Wilderness. And oh my gosh, at the time, it was the worst pack trip. So many wrecks, and I've talked about it on the show before. I'm not going to go into it, but so many wrecks, so many things just went wrong. And looking back, I'm like, that was fun. Like, some of the hardest times you come through it. I guess when you suffer the most, it's the most fun. And so, I guess you could keep that perspective of it too. There might be some times where you're struggling with your horsemanship or struggling just generally in life, but you'll look back on those and you'll be glad you did it. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, Emily, thank you so much. Will you tell my listeners real quick where they can find Eclectic Horseman and Horseman's Gazette and all your educational materials?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Ty. This has been fun. The easiest place to find us is just on our website, which is eclectic-horseman.com. And you can find all of the things that we offer there.
It's awesome. They got books, videos, videos and books galore. You got so many things. I could spend a lot of money buying all them books. You got a whole library, it's
Yeah.
amazing. So great materials there. And anyways, Emily, thank you again for what you do for the horsemanship world. Thanks again for coming on the show. All my listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We sure appreciate you. If you'd be generous enough to leave a review either on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, I would be extremely grateful. Also, big thanks to our sponsors that make this podcast free for all of you to listen to. Big shout out to Roman Home. If you're looking for a good wall tent for hunting, camping, getting out in the outdoors, look up Roman Home Tents. Also, Colt Saddlery. If you're looking for a custom built saddle, got to check them out. We got Diamond W Enterprises. If you're looking for a good jack to take care of your mare this spring, get you a baby mule, look up Diamond W Enterprises. Also, a shout out to Western Mule Magazine as well as Mules and More Magazine. They've been longtime supporters of this show. And with that, you guys, thank you so much for listening. God bless y'all, and we'll see you down the road.